himself, tell us what his role is, what you do now, and yeah, how has your career changed over the years? Let's hear it from in your own words.
Sure, absolutely. So I guess first thing, salam to everyone. I'm super happy to be here. A little bit about myself. I was actually did not have a traditional career trajectory into technology. I actually got my undergraduate degree in biochemistry, and since then, I guess I've kind of had a little winding career path to where I've gotten now. After I became a scientist, I worked in research labs with real mice, like published papers, wore a white lab coat, all those things. And I decided it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. So I went back to university for my master's, and I got a master's in social science of the internet. And I looked at the social factors influencing how scientists use artificial intelligence for cancer research. Once again, this also wasn't a technology like a tech degree. It was really looking at the sociology and the psychological aspects of the research. After that, I was looking for a job because I was leaving university and wanted to, finally earn some money. And I moved to Berlin and started working for a startup there. And the startup that I was working on was doing a machine learning platform on on this new technology called Kubernetes. And when I showed up at my first day of work, I didn't know like really how to use a computer or how to find the command line. And they said, all right, the first thing you need to do is set up a Kubernetes cluster. And so it took me probably 8 hours to do that, where now probably most people can do it in probably under a minute. So it was definitely a struggle and not an easy way. But I guess I would say I learned a lot of things in the tech industry, like at that job, by going through a whole bunch of, blog posts, YouTube tutorials, like different conference videos, and that's really, I would say, how I learned about the tech industry and the cloud computing industry as a whole. Like every good startup, that one failed. So I needed to find a new job, and I started working at another company that was doing a Kubernetes platform, and I spent a couple like good years there. Learned quite a lot again. Once again, by instead of like this time just reading stuff, I also started to write things. That's I think an important part of my learning process is not only consuming things but also reformulating other people's ideas. And I started to give presentations and write different blog articles for our company. And through being able to understand the technologies, I created, kind of my own voice, my own thoughts, my own ideas of how the technologies works and what impacts they should have on businesses. And then after that company, I moved to my current job, which is at the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which is a sub foundation of the Linux Foundation. And we work on building the community and the ecosystem around important cloud computing technologies, open source technologies like Kubernetes, Prometheus, Envoy, Linkerd. So there's 90 different projects under the CNCF. It's a massive and growing ecosystem. There's currently 125,000 contributors from 177 different countries around the world. And I think one of the most exciting things about my job is that I get to interact with so many different people around the world, like being able to, talk and connect with some students in Addis right now. So I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome. That's very inspirational and very descriptive. Even answered some of the questions that I was going to ask, but just to follow that up with, you transitioned in a major way. So you did your undergrad in biochemistry, did a lot of research, worked in the business development areas, but learning by yourself, trying to understand technologies, gave you a voice of your own, which you finally ended up in your current role. What were some of the challenges you had to navigate as a student or trying to enter the industry? You said you had to learn on your own. It took you long hours to figure out minor or easy commands. and what have you learned from them? I mean, character-wise, persistence-wise, did you what was your entire yeah what's your thought about that area or that topic?
Yeah, definitely. I would say the exciting thing about the tech industry above, or besides a lot of other industry, is that there are so many resources out there for people to learn. Like there's a lot of free content that people produce. There's free training courses. I think like the most important thing is really just like showing up with an ability and an excitement to learn, because I think it's a very open industry where if you have like the right mindset, be like, hey, like I may not understand it today, but I'll be able to understand it tomorrow or next week or next month if I put in the time, then you are able to make massive strides in the industry. And like in a few short years, I've really had like the privilege to, I think, rise up the ranks to be able to now work for one of the like leading open source foundations in the world. And I wouldn't say that's probably true of most of most industries around the world. I think it's a lot longer process. There's not as many resources, but I think that's the cool thing about working in cloud computing, working in the tech industry, is that there is so much out there for you to learn, and it's free and open for everybody.
Awesome, fantastic. Thank you. Okay. So can you mention some of the skill sets or unique skills that you need or that you have developed over time to fit into your current role?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So my role is a little bit different because than I think what a lot of people would do. So I work kind of in developer evangelism, which is going out and talking and promoting the different like open source technologies, or if you're working at a company, the company's products to different developer communities. I think like the big thing in any part of your career is like I said before, like that ability to learn, but then there's more specific things on top of that. I think the tech industry can change so fast because you can write something in the morning and run it in the afternoon or run it a minute later, and you can always like continue to update it, versus I don't know, like say an industry like construction where once you commit to building a building, you're going to be building that building for like a whole year, and you can't really change things as you're going along, and there's a lot more like strict requirements and standards that you need to follow. So I think really having that flexibility and like creativity is important, because the technologies will always keep on changing. Like right now, at the CNCF, like where we work is the big technology right now is Kubernetes, and before that it was Linux, which we're part of the Linux Foundation. And after Kubernetes, there will be another technology, and after that technology, there will be another technology. So things will always like keep on changing, and it's being able to not always maybe keep up with the pace of change, but be like open to change and be like willing to try new technologies. There's like different career paths that you can go down depending on what most fits your skill set and like interests and needs. And I think you can be a developer, you can be on the operations side, you can also work in developer evangelism, and each of them like require like slightly different skill sets. It just depends on like what you want to work on. So the developers get to actually build things. So if you like being, I guess, maybe more like creative and seeing something that you built with your own hands like actually in front of someone, then maybe a developer is like the best like career track for you. If you want to make things stable, make things work, know that at the end of the day like you're kind of making sure that the lights are on, then that's more on like the operations side. And then like if you like interacting and engaging with people, like getting people excited about different things, and going out and talking and telling stories, then maybe like developer evangelism is better for you. But technologies are going to be transitory. Like there's going to be lots of different technologies like over your career, and it's just figuring out like what keeps you happy on a day-to-day basis, and what type of tasks will be most exciting for you. And I fell into my current role because I really like going out and talking to people, engaging with different people, and telling a story. I think that's what I like about my current job, but that's not right for everybody. So everybody has to find kind of what it makes them excited to show up to work in the morning.
Awesome. Thank you. That's very, very, yeah, descriptive. And like you said, the technology sector has got a very low overhead, and it's always changing. And you could definitely find your role by moving across different, yeah, different roles in your career path. So the first half of this session is more about life lessons and advices, and then we'll move on to industry insights. So we have a lot of people on this call, also who will be checking out the videos that doesn't have a lot of information on what cloud computing is, on what open sources are. We'll get to that in a minute. So we'll give you a chance to yeah, do your work and evangelize us. Before we move on, though, I'd like to ask you one more question. So I was checking out your schedules, and you have a very busy schedule. You're always working, you're always talking to developers, having coffee talks with everyone. How do you let your hair down, or how do you cope with work and your work-life balance? What's your recommendation, or what are the techniques that you use?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, especially since I've always been a remote worker. There's no office to go into and to leave, so there's no clear start or end of the day. And since I work in tech, like I always have like my email and my Slack, like on my phone, on my laptop. I always could be working if I wanted to. So I think this is also like a super important topic, because you also need to step away. If you want to like work your best, you need to be able to step back from the work and take some time out for yourself. So for me personally, like I've always been an athlete growing up. Like I did lots of different sports. I used to race bikes like semi-professionally, and I really just enjoy being outside. So for me, what that looks like is I either take a run or go for a bike ride like every single day, and it usually helps like break up my day, so it's not I'm just sitting at the computer for 8 hours. And then I try to keep fairly regular work hours too, so I start working at a certain point in the morning, go for my run like in the afternoon, and then like end at the same time each day. Like obviously it doesn't always work out like that, but I think the thing about like being a remote worker is like you really kind of have to help hold yourself accountable, and taking it out and know that you're going to produce better work if you take time for yourself and really step back. Because I've found really like a lot of my best ideas have come like on my runs, not when I'm sitting in front of a computer staring at it for another 6, 7, 8, 9 hours. That's not where I think I come up with my best ideas. My best ideas are when I'm away from the computer, not even really thinking about my job. So I think if you really want to like excel, it's super important to also take time away from your career too.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's some very helpful insights on how to balance your work with your regular life. It's also cool that you got another hobby where you get to bike every morning and generate new inspirations, get new ideas for your work. Yeah, pretty cool. Thank you so much. So I have finished my questions for life lesson and advice section. Let's move on to the industry insights topic. Uh, I'd like to give you a chance to tell us a little bit about what open source is to you. So we hear the word open source here and there often. Sometimes knowing what it really is, going around the bush, but we don't exactly know what open source is, how it's being used out there, because a lot of us on the school are students in universities. So what would you say is open? What's open source to you in short? Just a quick brief explanation.
Yeah. I guess this is a really broad and open question. Like if we're actually looking at like the pure like definition there's actually the open source initiative, which defines what open source is and what open source isn't. So there is like a technical definition, but I would say for me personally, what open source is about the ability for anyone to show up and contribute in various different ways to a software project, and being able to the outcome and the result and the ultimate direction of that project too. So I think there's multiple different ways that can happen, and there's multiple different ways to do open source too, and they all have kind of like different outcomes. The actual like classic book that I would kind of point out if people want to dive more into this topic is The Cathedral and the Bazaar by Eric Reyes. It's an awesome book talking about kind of like where open source came from. It came from kind of this hacker culture of people who just wanted to, make things work and like see if they could do things and improve and tinker with things. And I think that kind of like ethos and that kind of culture is still important. The key part of open source for me is like being able to like dive into the code yourself and make it better. And so there's multiple different ways to run open source projects. People have different ways. You can have one-person open source projects. You can have multi-person open source projects. You can have an open source project run by a company. You can have an open source project hosted in a foundation like the Linux Foundation. But like ultimately, at the end of the day, I think it comes down to the ability to make the changes that you need to make the code better.
Awesome. So it's so to put it in a word or in a sentence, it would be like contributors would have we can easily voice their opinion and contribute to a project in the vision they have, as long as the entire community agrees upon. Right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that recommendation for the book. Bemiret, can you search that and maybe drop the link for everyone so they could check it out after the call? Until Bemiret does that, let me move on to the next topic. I think that would interest you the most. What is the cloud to you? How would you explain it to yourself when you were back in college doing your biochem undergrad? How would you describe it for your own self back then?
Well, how I would describe open source to myself?
I mean the cloud, not open source, but cloud.
The cloud. I would describe the cloud as somebody else is running your computer for you. Like very simply. The cloud is just, you're paying somebody else to run a computer, whether that's like a server or some other type of hardware, and they take care of it for you. And you can just call up and interact with that computer with the click of a button or the call of an API, but I didn't know what an API is. It's just, yeah, I think there's a classic cartoon that the cloud is just somebody else's computer. So like at a very high level.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's I haven't heard of that joke before. Yeah, but definitely. So you can say that it's a managed resource elsewhere, so that you can work on it remotely. So it's kind of got the answer. Cool. Thank you. So a little bit. Tell us more about your community, the CNCF community. You said it's under the Linux Foundation, and one of the biggest projects that's currently very famous is the Kubernetes project. So what else are you working on? How many developers roughly do you estimate that they're working on Kubernetes? Because I know a lot of people, even in Microsoft, who were assigned the task to directly work on the Kubernetes platform. How big is this open source project that you guys are taking on right now?
Yeah, definitely. So Kubernetes has really taken the cloud computing like industry by storm. I think a lot of people call it like the Linux of the cloud or the operating system of the cloud. And what Kubernetes does is kind of provides a consistent and portable platform wherever you want to run distributed applications or distributed software. There's a lot of like great statistics on like how many people are actually contributing to Kubernetes itself, and I can actually pull some up. So we have this great tool at the CNCF called DevStats, and I can drop a link for it too, and it shows how many people contribute. So the exact numbers, my computer's going slow right now, is there's probably, so every single release, which they just switched from a 3-month release cycle to a 4-month release cycle, there's usually a couple thousand contributors to each release, and that's across various different like parts of the project. And so that'll be things like there's a like they call them special interest groups, like so SIGs tied to specific parts of the project. So there's SIG testing, making sure that everything's working. There's SIG nodes, making sure that we can like integrate nodes, like different like servers into Kubernetes. There's SIG architecture, looking at like the overall architecture. And so across these various different like teams, there's thousands of people contributing to every single release of Kubernetes. And it really is like a mixture of different people that are contributing to like Kubernetes and other CNCF projects. And each project, like the biggest ones are probably the companies that you've heard of, like Google, Microsoft, Red Hat, and VMware. But actually, it's usually around like the 3rd or 4th largest contributor are just like independent people. And so these are people that are not tied to any company, but are just contributing either because they like the community, they work with Kubernetes and want to make it better. You know, they have their own vision of how they can make it better, or like also like students too. I can actually tell you like my first contribution to the Kubernetes project was as an independent contributor. And all it was fixing a broken link in the documentation. So I was reading through because I was trying to, you know, as I said before, teach myself about Kubernetes and about the cloud computing landscape. And I saw a link that was broken in the documentation, so I submitted a pull request to fix the link. And that was my first contribution to the Kubernetes community. So if you're thinking about getting involved in open source, don't think like you need to be an expert, you need to know how everything works, or you need to know all the details of a project. Like you can become a contributor by just, you know, fixing the documentation. And that's also super important because that's how people learn about the projects too. Beyond just Kubernetes, like CNCF hosts 90 different projects, or over 90 different projects across various stages of maturity. So we say there's sandbox, incubating, and graduated. Sandbox is like the experimental projects. Incubating is kind of the projects that have gained some adoption. Some companies are putting it into production or pre-production. And the graduated projects are saying, hey, these projects have the like production. If you put them into production, you can be confident that they're ready for production too.
Awesome, great. Yeah. Okay, let me follow that up with a few questions. Can you tell us a little bit about, so you said something about distributed softwares on applications and how the cloud supports that, and how CNCF is trying to achieve adoption across different areas. So can you give us examples of softwares, just a high-level overview, or some companies that are making use of the technologies that you are developing? I also saw that you're very interested in talking about telecos and edge computing, and here in Ethiopia, in the country that we are hosting this session from, that's an industry that's on the rise these days, especially in the last few months. So can you relate to us by giving us a few examples and how it plays an important role in edge computing and in telecos as well?
Sure. So I'm going to start with like some use cases. So I actually sent a link to our to our case study program, and this is where you can dive in to companies that are tackling all types of challenges like automation, availability, efficiency, elasticity, the type of cloud they have, like the country that they're in, the industry, and like what projects they're using. And so there's lots of different companies that are using various different CNCF like projects for like different things. So I can actually give you two examples from our latest KubeCon of companies that were doing it. So one was obviously like a very pertinent issue right now is like the COVID-19 pandemic. And we had somebody from the Institute of Health in Ireland talking about how they had used Linkerd, which was a service mesh technology, to roll out their COVID tracking app a lot faster than they could have without it, because it provided more security and reliability, and it improved their ability to, you know, develop and put their application into production. The other talk, actually really specific to telcos and edge computing, was from Deutsche Telekom. And so they're the major telecommunications provider in Germany. And they're talking about their problem is as they're rolling out 5G, they have thousands of locations across the country. But if they want to take advantage of some of the advanced like technology allowed by 5G, things like network slicing, or being able to provide like quality of service, you also need some compute at each of those 1,000 locations. And so the problem that they were trying to overcome is, how do we manage the compute at the thousands of locations spread all over Germany in an automated way so that we can actually do this in a scalable way? And the way that they came up with doing that was actually to use a couple different CNCF technologies. So one was Kubernetes for the orchestration of the actual applications or workloads on all these edge compute nodes. And another one was Flux, which is a way to do continuous delivery, or like GitOps, for controlling the version of what you're running in a production environment. And so with a combination of these and some other like CNCF technologies, they're able to run thousands of Kubernetes clusters in distributed edge computing locations all across Germany to deliver these on the promise of 5G. And so that's what Deutsche Telekom from Germany is doing with cloud native technologies, and what it allows them to do. Like, their team is 10 engineers, but they're able to control a lot of the telecommunications infrastructure for all of Germany with just 10 people, which I think is pretty impressive when you think about it. And that's really, I think, what cloud native projects offer and can allow companies to do, is to scale up what is possible while not having to drastically expand the number of people they need to do it.
Yeah, that's truly impressive. Yeah, very, very amazing. What you can be able to achieve with a small group of people, if you are running on a managed instance of servers and nodes and whatnot, developed by your community. So I'd like to ask you, so what are the challenges that you face in your role? How do, so you said you manage the CNCF supports about 125,000 contributors, or just 125 contributors, and from hundreds of different countries. How do you keep them engaged so that they could come back and continue to develop and keep on adding their contribution and their vision to the project?
Yeah, I mean, that is the question we're facing. It's 125,000 contributors from 177 different countries. How do we keep them engaged? But also, how do we get companies to like adopt the technology? You know, like for example, like Deutsche Telekom, probably they don't have a lot of developers because they're not a software development company. They're a telecommunications company. They're using the projects and putting them into production, but they're not necessarily going to be the people that are developing them. And so at CNCF, we actually like to think of it as like a whole like ecosystem, and it's our job to help nurture and grow this ecosystem. And so what we kind of see as this cycle is there are open source projects where everybody can come together from the community and provide kind of like a standard baseline of interoperability and like ways to work together. I think that's what Kubernetes provides, is a consistent way to run applications across distributed compute. Then, though, like various vendors, so companies like Red Hat or Microsoft or Google or VMware, can then take those projects and turn them into actual products. And so what these products do, so the projects provide a consistency across the ecosystem, and then the projects address specific business needs. So whether it's like Red Hat designing a specific stack for the telecommunications industry, or Google providing a healthcare cloud, what they're able to do is to turn these these projects into actual products that meet business use cases, business needs, and business requirements. They are able then to sell these products to actual end users. So these are companies that are actually delivering things into production. So companies like NTM, who is trying to deliver a telecommunications infrastructure. And these companies are able to take these products, deliver actually end value to somebody in Ethiopia who's trying to connect and call a friend. And they're the end users, as we like to call them, that are actually serving people or other businesses, are able to meet their business needs, pay the vendors for the actual products, and the vendors are able then to invest their profits from these products back into the industry, back into the ecosystem, and back into the projects. So it creates a very virtuous cycle from projects to products to profits, and those profits get invested back into the ecosystem. And so with this cycle, we're able to create and sustain this ecosystem of all these contributors. And so that's what we try to do at CNCF, is create this virtuous cycle. And we have various different programs that we do to help kind of create and sustain this ecosystem. So to list a few, we have local community chapters, similar to the Google developer groups too, called either cloud native computing or Kubernetes user groups, or various different things, creating these local communities. We also run various conferences where people can come together, like the Kubernetes Community Day. There's actually just a KCD Africa that happened last month. There's also our large industry events called KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, that we run 3 times a year to bring the industry together. CNCF collects membership fees from the various companies that are benefiting from the ecosystem and invest it into things like security audits, platform tools that these projects don't have to go collect money on their own. And we also do a lot of marketing and PR work too. Is a lot of technology is also awareness, is getting people to know what their problem is and understand how your project can help them come and find a solution. So a lot of companies that say are struggling with ways to deliver software quickly and reliably might turn to various different technologies to help them solve the problems that they're facing. And so this is what CNCF likes to help do, is tell the story of how these projects help deliver on that. And that's a lot of what our case studies do too. So CNCF, it's not all of the programs that CNCF runs, but that's kind of a list of how we try to help create and sustain this ecosystem.
Awesome. By the looks of it and by the rate of adaptation that we're currently seeing, it looks like you're doing a pretty good job. So for students, for beginners, for university freshman students, people in tech, or junior developers, when would you say is the right time to pursue a career in open source, or to begin contributing to any of the CNCF projects? You said you already, the first time you were contributing to the project was by fixing a broken link. What would you advise if people are feeling overwhelmed by maybe creating a pull request? When would you say is the best time for a student or for a junior developer to start to join this community?
Yeah. So I think there's never a wrong time, but there's also multiple ways to get involved. So I'll actually drop a link to our Cloud Native Student Toolkit and kind of like walk you through, because I think a lot of people think like I'm not a member of the community until I make my first pull request. But there's a lot you can do and a lot you can learn like before that. And, I learned a lot before I even ever made my first pull request. So it's not like there's a lot of ways to do that. And so the first thing that you can do if you want to like learn more is like the Linux Foundation offers like a lot of free training courses that you can have. So there's actually an introduction to cloud infrastructure technologies. And these are courses on our edX that we like provide to the community for free, because it's important for us to get more people like into the ecosystem and to get them to understand what does a cloud technology actually mean. And so I think like a great way for students to get started is, you're already learning, is to, find out more about like cloud technologies and find out if this is something that you're interested in. That's why we provide these free training courses. The next thing I would say would be to attend like local meetups like this. So whether it's like a cloud native computing meetup or like a DSC group, I think it's great to interact and like learn from other people around you. And then once you have that, you can attend like other conferences as a way to learn about the industry and interact and engage with people. So the thing that CNCF does for students is we actually give free tickets to students to attend KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, because we want to give them the opportunity to grow and learn within the industry so that they can understand if this is something that they're interested in pursuing further. There's also the Cloud Native community groups and Kubernetes community days that I talked about before that offer free tickets to students to help them grow in the industry. Then there's also like more in-depth training courses that CNCF provides for the different technologies. The next thing is you can actually be paid to contribute to different projects. So once you've gotten your feet wet, like started to participate in a project, another thing CNCF does is fund the students to work on open source projects. So you can actually get paid to work for a whole summer on open source projects. And there's links in the mentoring repo about where you can find out more about that. And so I think some people think like, oh, you can't get paid to do open source, so you need to do it for free. But I think it's also like important. Like most people that are working on Kubernetes, or a lot of people that are working Kubernetes and other cloud native technologies, they're getting paid as part of their job to contribute to these technologies. Like you were saying before, you talked to a whole bunch of people at Microsoft that work full time on Kubernetes, and that is what they do. Companies see that these projects are important for them and their business strategy, and so they pay people to like work on them. And you can get started with that as a student. And I think the really cool thing about that is that it gives you kind of exposure to working with different people in the industry. I know a lot of students or like former mentees that have gotten job offers out of it because the people that they're working with in open source have seen like their ability to work on open source projects and like their work, and they're ready to hire them into full-time jobs. Like I know one of our mentees, I think it was like last year, like Uchi from Lagos, he actually now works full-time at Grafana based on his experience contributing to the Thanos project within CNCF. So there's actually lots of great ways to get involved, and it can actually lead to a job after graduation too. And I think the really great thing about like cloud technology jobs is they can also be like very high paying too.
Awesome. That's very fantastic to hear. So are the links to this event, to this conferences, can we find them directly in the links that you shared in the toolkit, on the last link that you sent, or do we have to go for on the internet and have to look for it on ourselves?
Yep. No, so they're all in the Cloud Native Toolkit in like the link that I sent.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you. So I have one final question for you, and then we can give you the stage to that's like getting major support, and maybe where students should kind of focus at current time, maybe?
Um, yeah, so I guess I'll break that down into like two different things. So one is like current industry trends, and then like the second part is like what students should focus on. So the first thing in terms of like industry trends, I would say the thing that we always talk about is that the value moves up the stack. In terms of the lower levels of the stack are going to get commoditized, because if you kind of look at the history of the tech industry, is first the hardware was really important and it was really specialized and really expensive, but now it's really a commodity. You know, you can buy x86 servers and they're all like pretty much the same. Then the next layer was like the operating system. You had like lots of different operating systems. If you think about like Ubuntu or if you look at operating systems, but now it's table stakes. You know, they're not that much of a point of differentiation. It's like a nice to have rather than something that is really providing that like extra layer of value on top. So the operating system is now a commodity. And then we kind of saw the same things in the cloud is right. First, the big thing was what orchestration system were you using? So was it going to be Kubernetes? Was it going to be Docker Swarm? Was it going to be Nomad? And eventually the industry has landed and has kind of decided on Kubernetes, and that's what most people run, and it makes it easier. And so that's kind of like the consistent layer. And so the value is like moving up the stack more now. And so I think the thing that we're really looking forward to now is looking at how we can improve the like app development and like developer experience, and also like the app delivery experience. So like hot things right now are things like GitOps and like service mesh and other things that allow you to deliver applications faster. So like moving the value up the stack again above Kubernetes to kind of like the next layer of cloud native technologies. And so I think if you're looking for like the other parts are always there and always important. Like it's important that you have like hardware and an operating system, but like a lot of the but those have all kind of, you know, become like not consistent, but like all more harmonized and like easier to do. Whereas like the real value and the real creativity is going to happen at like higher layers of the stack. And so going back to like what students should get involved in, I think this goes back to my earlier answer of what are you interested in, what's going to excite you, and like what do you want to be working on. So I mean, at the end of the day, somebody still has to run the operating system. If that's interesting for you, creating that like stability, that's like absolutely go for it. If you're more excited about like creating new technologies, experimenting with things, seeing how things work, how things don't, then you're going to want to work at like a higher layer of the stack. They all have interesting problems. It's just what problem is going to be most interesting for you. And just remember that like everything is always going to be changing. There's always going to be new technologies. Like even in the kernel right now, one of the new hot technologies is eBPF. It allows you to execute programs like next to the kernel without having to embed like have the code as part of the upstream kernel. So there's still a lot of excitement happening in the operating system world right now too. It's just what is most interesting for you, where do you want to start, and just like always have that like learning mindset on.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I have completed my questions that I've got for you for today. But I want to give you the chance. If there's anything left you'd like to share, you'd like to tell us. If you want to share your links to your blogs, you said you do writings for your company. If you have a link where we can reach you at, your socials, your Twitter link. If anyone would like to get in one-on-one with you, and if you're available, please have your say, and share your socials with us.
Sure, absolutely. So probably the best ways to reach me is one, like on Twitter. A lot of the tech industry is very active on Twitter. So I think it's also a great resource. I forgot, that's probably one of my this is probably what I've used the most to learn, is actually just following people on Twitter and listening to their opinions and what they think about things. So I'd also highly encourage people to check that out. Like, look for like different people to follow. You can also like connect with me on LinkedIn. Super happy to do that. Also, if you want to like talk with me, I'm always happy to like meet with different people in the community and like talk about where they're going. I would be happy if you just like book a meeting with me and talk. I'd be happy to like go more into like one-on-one things, because I know right now was kind of like a very high level description of a lot of things. Just feel free to reach out to me. Like, we're meant to be a community resource at CNCF, and we're trying to, you know, grow and sustain the cloud native ecosystem. If you want to learn like more about like CNCF, I just check out our website. It has like a lot of great stats there. Also, the blog has a lot of like really like relevant content. The most exciting thing for me that just came out that I've been working on for a while is Cloud Native TV. And so this is live streaming on Twitch. And we're going to have 10 awesome shows from across the community on various different things. Like, for example, there's going to be one show called Looks Good to Me, where the host, David McKay, is going to bring a maintainer of a CNCF project on every single week. And they're going to go through how to get started contributing to a cloud native project. So if you want to learn how to contribute to different projects across the ecosystem, then this is the show for you. Yeah, I guess there's so many different ways to get started. It's just, I would say the biggest thing is just, you know, jumping in and figuring out what you want to do. So with that, like, I'm happy to take any questions or like comments that people have.
Yeah, awesome. If any of you here in the chat have a question for Bill here, yeah, now is the time to type it in the chat. And yeah, Bill can answer it right away. We don't have a lot of people on the call, but yeah, if there are any questions, any clarifications that you need, any more comments.
So there's one question: is there any differences between cloud services offered? Are you asking about the cloud services offered by different like clouds like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, or between like the different like ones in one specific cloud? Oh, okay. Is there any different? Okay, yeah. So yeah, there absolutely is differences between the cloud services offered by, like, so the big three ones are Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. I think they all have like their own take and their own way into the industry. Like, obviously, Microsoft probably has the most stuff around like the Microsoft Office and like the whole like Microsoft suites, like SQL Server and other like things. If you want to run them on Azure, you're probably going to have like your best experience there. Google, like, the industry perception is that it's like the most developer friendly and has like the smoothest experience. Though like everybody has their own opinion on this, where Amazon has kind of like the most offerings. I think they have like 250 or more different services that they offer. So I think they're all kind of, each cloud has its own thing, but like at the end of the day, like what they're all offering is like networking, storage, and compute. The like additional managed services on top of that are based on like what their like customers require on top of that. So it's impossible, or it'd be really hard for me to break down like all the offerings of all the different clouds. They each have their own advantages and different disadvantages. Some clouds offer like, I know, services that other ones don't. Like, I know Amazon offers like a managed blockchain solution as a random service, but they each provide kind of their own take on what is most important to their customers. So yeah, there definitely is differences between all the different cloud services, and they each offer different things. But yeah, which one is better for starters of the technology to get used to them? Um, from what I've heard, I would say Google Cloud probably has the best experience, and it has best documentation, and is the most like user-friendly interface. Um, in terms of, I wouldn't recommend Amazon because their free tier is not like actually free, and there's been a lot of problems with people being overcharged when they thought they were just spinning things up on the free tier. So I would probably avoid Amazon. Um, yeah, I would probably start with Google because I think they're a consumer products company, and so I think they have the most experience with like actual like users and running things at scale. If you're using like an Android operating system, that's a Google product too, or Google Maps or Google Search. And so I think their experience in like really the consumer facing industries like at scale have really translated and helped them in their cloud experience too. Is it needed to have background knowledge to learn cloud computing? Like absolutely not. Like I said before, I came from biochemistry. I didn't know anything about the cloud. Some would say I still don't. So you don't need any background knowledge. I think it's just willing to get started.
Any more questions? We almost, yeah, our time is up. We don't want to exhaust you for more than an hour, Bill. So if there are any more questions, you can still direct it to our group message on Telegram, on our channel, and then we can compile the questions, and then we'll make sure to send it over to Bill. And whenever Bill gets the time, he can probably respond to us, yeah, accordingly.
Yeah.
Um,
So super happy to answer, or just feel free to reach out to me too.
Yeah, that's also an option. You can reach out to him directly on his socials, which he shared up there. We got his Twitter and his LinkedIn. We also got his Calendly, where we can check his schedule. Thank you very much for meeting with us, having this session with us. It was a pleasure meeting you. I'd like to pass, yeah, the stage to Bamiret if there's anything you'd like to add on this. Yeah.
Uh, so one of my friends used to live in Ethiopia, and she gave me a phrase to say. So I might not say it right, but I'm going to try. Uh, Anu Buna Tetu. Is that? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, um, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for having me. Bye.